Stop right there. Put your hands where I can see them. Officer, I'm just shopping. Is there a problem? We received a report of suspicious activity. You need to come with us. Suspicious activity? I'm buying groceries. I have items in my cart. I haven't done anything suspicious. Sir, someone reported you concealing merchandise. We need to check your bags and pockets. Concealing merchandise. Everything in my cart is visible. I haven't concealed anything. I haven't even been to the checkout yet. Empty your pockets. Now, I'm Judge Harold Carter. I serve on the district court. I shop here every week. This is absurd. I don't care if you're the governor. Empty your pockets or you're under arrest for shoplifting and obstruction. I'm not emptying my pockets based on a false accusation. I want to speak to the store manager. I want to see who made this complaint. I have rights. You're refusing a lawful order. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Officers Kevin Walsh and Brandon Miller had been with the Detroit Police Department for 6 years and 4 years, respectively, when they walked into a situation that would destroy their careers and result in a $2.2 million jury verdict. Walsh was 31 years old. Miller was 28, both experienced enough to know better, but apparently convinced that a complaint about a black man in the produce section was sufficient justification to arrest a sitting judge without investigation. One Thursday evening at Eastwood Market in Detroit's Palmer Park neighborhood, they responded to a shoplifting call and saw Judge Harold Carter, a 22-year veteran of the district court bench, selecting vegetables for his dinner. What Walsh and Miller did next, ordering him to empty his pockets, refusing to verify his identity with store management, and handcuffing a judge in front of dozens of shoppers based on a complaint they never investigated, would become a textbook example of how racial profiling destroys careers, humiliates public officials, and costs cities millions. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. A black man in his mid-60s, Judge Harold Carter, stood in the produce section of a neighborhood grocery store wearing khaki slacks, a navy cardigan over a collared shirt, and comfortable walking shoes. His shopping cart contained a head of lettuce, tomatoes, bell peppers, a package of chicken breast, pasta, and olive oil, the ingredients for the healthy dinner he prepared most evenings when he wasn't working late at the courthouse. His wallet containing his judicial identification was in his back pocket. His car keys were in his jacket pocket. His reusable shopping bags hung from the cart handle. No concealed merchandise, no suspicious behavior, no shoplifting, just a distinguished jurist doing his weekly grocery shopping at the store 4 blocks from his home, where he'd shopped for 18 years. But officers Walsh and Miller saw him through a filter so distorted by a single unverified complaint that they couldn't process a well-dressed senior citizen as a legitimate customer, much less recognize one of the most respected judges in Detroit's court system. Eastwood Market sits on Hamilton Avenue in Palmer Park, an established Detroit neighborhood known for its historic homes, tree-lined streets, and professional-class residents. The market is a full-service grocery store serving the surrounding community with fresh produce, quality meats, an extensive wine selection, and prepared foods. The store caters to an educated, diverse clientele, physicians from nearby hospitals, attorneys from downtown firms, professors from Wayne State University, and retirees who have lived in Palmer Park for decades. The atmosphere is neighborhood-oriented, with staff who recognize regular customers and take pride in personalized service. It was 6:23 p.m. on a Thursday in October. The after-work shopping rush had begun, but the store wasn't crowded. Professionals stopped in for ingredients for dinner. Retirees browsed the aisles at their leisure. A few families with children navigated carts through the produce section. The store's background music played softly. Staff restocked shelves and assisted customers. The atmosphere was relaxed and routine, exactly what one would expect at a neighborhood grocery store on a weekday evening. The kind of Thursday evening where nothing dramatic typically happens beyond the ordinary rhythms of community commerce. Judge Harold Carter had served on the 36th District Court bench in Detroit for 22 years. 22 years presiding over civil disputes, traffic violations, small claims cases, and preliminary hearings in criminal matters. He'd handled tens of thousands of cases with a reputation for fairness, patience with unrepresented litigants, and thorough knowledge of Michigan law. Attorneys who appeared before him called him demanding but just. Court staff called him respectful and kind. Community members who'd had cases in his courtroom called him the judge who actually listened. Carter had graduated from Howard University before attending the University of Michigan Law School, where he'd been an editor of the Michigan Law Review. He'd practiced law for 15 years, starting as a public defender representing indigent clients before joining a small firm handling civil rights cases. He'd been appointed to the bench by the governor and subsequently elected to 4 consecutive 6-year terms. He'd served on judicial committees, mentored young attorneys, and taught trial advocacy as an adjunct professor. Legal publications had profiled him as one of Detroit's most respected jurists. The state bar had honored him with awards for judicial excellence and community service. At 64 years old, Judge Harold Carter was exactly where he'd worked to be. A senior member of the judiciary respected across the legal community, serving with integrity and fairness, looking forward to a few more years on the bench before retirement. That Thursday evening was routine in every way. Carter had finished a full day of hearings at the courthouse, changed out of his robe into the casual clothes he kept in his chambers, and driven to Eastwood Market to shop for groceries. He shopped there every week, usually on Thursday or Friday evenings. The staff knew him. He knew several other regular customers by sight. He'd been greeted by the produce manager when he entered, had selected his vegetables carefully, and was moving toward the meat department when 2 uniformed police officers approached him quickly with hands on their weapons. What Carter didn't know was that another shopper, a white woman in her 50s named Patricia Hoffman, had watched him place vegetables in his cart and convinced herself he was shoplifting. She hadn't seen him conceal anything. She had no evidence of theft. She simply saw a black man shopping and decided he must be stealing. She'd approached a store employee and reported a suspicious black male in the produce section possibly shoplifting. The employee, a young man working his first week at the store who didn't know Judge Carter, had called the store manager. The manager, rather than investigating the complaint himself or simply observing Judge Carter to see if any actual theft occurred, had called 911 and reported a shoplifting in progress. Officers Kevin Walsh and Brandon Miller were both patrol officers in the 2nd Precinct covering the Palmer Park area. Walsh had been with Detroit Police for 6 years. Miller had 4 years of experience. Both were young, aggressive, and prone to accepting complaints from white callers without question. They had formed assumptions about who belonged in upscale Detroit neighborhoods and who didn't. They believed that shoplifting was rampant and that most shoplifters were black. They thought their job was to respond to calls and make arrests, not to investigate whether crimes had actually occurred. In their combined 10 years of service, Walsh and Miller had accumulated troubling records. Walsh had 9 complaints in 6 years. 7 involved allegations of unlawful detention, excessive force, or racial profiling. 2 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and training. Miller had 7 complaints in 4 years. 6 involved allegations of racial bias or improper searches. 1 had been sustained with a 1-day suspension. The pattern was clear. Both officers demonstrated bias against people of color, particularly in situations involving white complainants. When Walsh and Miller received the shoplifting call at Eastwood Market, they responded immediately. The dispatcher's information was minimal. Report of shoplifting in progress, suspect described as black male, 60s, in the produce section. No description of what was allegedly stolen. No confirmation that theft had occurred. Just a bare-bones report that fit their preconceptions about crime in their precinct. They arrived at the store, spoke briefly with the manager who pointed toward Judge Carter, and approached him without observing his behavior or asking any questions about what he'd supposedly stolen. Do you think police officers should face consequences for arresting judges and other citizens based on unverified shoplifting complaints? Drop your answer below. Judge Harold Carter was examining a package of chicken breast, checking the sell-by date and considering whether to grill or bake it for dinner when he sensed someone approaching quickly. He looked up and saw 2 police officers walking toward him purposefully, their body language suggesting confrontation rather than routine contact. Stop right there. Put your hands where I can see them. Carter placed the chicken back in the cooler and turned to face the officers, his hands visible at his sides. Officer, I'm just shopping. Is there a problem? We received a report of suspicious activity. You need to come with us. This is where reasonable suspicion requires articulable facts. Officers Walsh and Miller had received a report of shoplifting but hadn't observed any theft, hadn't identified any concealed merchandise, hadn't even verified with store management whether any items were actually missing. Before detaining anyone, they needed to investigate. Carter's voice remained calm, though confusion was evident. Suspicious activity. I'm buying groceries. I have items in my cart. I haven't done anything suspicious. Can you tell me what this is about? Miller moved to Carter's side, positioning for control. Sir, someone reported you concealing merchandise. We need to check your bags and pockets. Carter looked at his shopping cart where every item was clearly visible. Concealing merchandise. Everything in my cart is visible. I haven't concealed anything. I haven't even been to the checkout yet. Everything I've selected is sitting right here in plain view. Walsh's hand moved toward his handcuffs. Empty your pockets. Now. This is where the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches. Officers cannot demand that someone empty their pockets without reasonable suspicion of a crime based on specific and articulable facts. The officers had no evidence of theft beyond a complaint they hadn't investigated. Carter felt anger rising but maintained judicial composure. I'm Judge Harold Carter. I serve on the 36th District Court. I shop here every week. The staff know me. This is absurd. I'm asking you to speak with the store manager before this goes any further. Walsh's tone hardened. I don't care if you're the governor. Empty your pockets or you're under arrest for shoplifting and obstruction. Carter made a decision. As a judge, he knew his rights. As a black man in America, he knew that asserting those rights could be dangerous. But he refused to be humiliated in his neighborhood grocery store based on a false accusation. I'm not emptying my pockets based on a false accusation. I want to speak to the store manager. I want to see who made this complaint. I have rights under the Fourth Amendment. You have no probable cause to search me. Miller grabbed Carter's arm. You're refusing a lawful order. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Other shoppers had stopped to watch. An elderly white woman who recognized Judge Carter from community events called out, "That's Judge Carter. He's a judge. What are you doing?" "Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you." A store employee who'd worked at Eastwood Market for 12 years rushed over. "Officers, that's Judge Carter. He shops here every week. He's not shoplifting. This is a mistake." Walsh ignored the employee and pulled Carter's arms behind his back, applying handcuffs. Carter didn't physically resist, but he spoke clearly for the witnesses and for the store's security cameras. "I am not resisting. I am Judge Harold Carter, 36th District Court. I am being unlawfully arrested without probable cause. I want everyone here to witness this. I have not shoplifted anything. I have not concealed any merchandise. This is racial profiling." The handcuffs were applied tightly, deliberately uncomfortable. Carter winced but said nothing about the pain. Miller began searching Carter's pockets without consent, pulling out his wallet, his car keys, his phone, and a handkerchief. No stolen merchandise. No evidence of theft. Nothing that would justify the arrest. Should police officers be required to investigate shoplifting complaints before handcuffing customers? Let me know what you think. The store manager, David Bennett, finally emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. He was a white man in his early 40s who'd managed Eastwood Market for 8 years. He'd called the police based on an employee's report without investigating the complaint himself. Now he saw Judge Carter, one of his regular customers, a distinguished member of the community, a sitting judge, handcuffed in his store while dozens of shoppers watched in horror. "Officers, what's going on?" Walsh turned to Bennett, still holding Carter's arm. "You called about shoplifting. We're arresting the suspect." Bennett's face went pale. "Suspect? That's Judge Carter. He's been shopping here for years. He's not a shoplifter. You reported suspicious activity. We responded. I reported what an employee told me. I didn't verify it myself. I should have. This is a terrible mistake." A white shopper who'd been standing nearby, a man in his 60s wearing a University of Michigan sweatshirt, stepped forward. "Officer, I'm Professor Martin Silverman. I teach constitutional law at Wayne State. That man in handcuffs is Judge Harold Carter. He presides over the district court. I've known him for 15 years. He is not a shoplifter. You've arrested him without probable cause, conducted a search without consent, and ignored multiple witnesses who have identified him. This is a Fourth Amendment violation, and I'm documenting everything." Walsh's confidence wavered. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, can you run a name?" "Harold Carter, 60s, black male." The dispatcher's response came back within 30 seconds. "Harold Carter, date of birth." Shows up as Judge Harold Carter, 36th District Court. No warrants, no criminal history, judicial identification on file. The realization hit Walsh and Miller simultaneously. They just handcuffed a sitting judge in a grocery store based on an unverified shoplifting complaint. Miller quickly removed the handcuffs. Walsh took a step back, his expression shifting from aggressive confidence to defensive panic. "Your Honor, there's been a misunderstanding. We received a call about shoplifting." Carter rubbed his wrists where the handcuffs had left marks. He looked at both officers with an expression that mixed fury and disappointment. "A misunderstanding. You handcuffed me in my neighborhood grocery store without investigating whether I'd actually stolen anything. You demanded I empty my pockets without probable cause. You searched me without consent. You ignored the store employee who identified me. You ignored a customer who identified me. You arrested me because someone reported a black man in the produce section, and you assumed that complaint was legitimate." Walsh attempted to defend the arrest. We were responding to a call. You were enforcing racism. You received a complaint and made an arrest without conducting even a basic investigation. You didn't check the security footage. You didn't ask the store manager if anything was actually missing. You didn't observe me concealing anything. You just saw a black man and decided I must be a criminal. Bennett, the store manager, stepped forward. Judge Carter, I apologize profusely. This should never have happened. I should have investigated the complaint before calling police. I'm deeply sorry. Carter turned to Bennett, his voice stern but measured. Mr. Bennett, you've seen me shop here for 18 years. You know me. You know I'm a judge. And yet when someone called me suspicious, you didn't verify it. You just called armed police officers. Think about what that says. A supervisor arrived on scene, Lieutenant Monica Harris, a 15-year veteran who recognized Judge Carter immediately from cases she'd testified in over the years. She took in the situation, Judge Carter rubbing his wrists, 2 patrol officers looking defensive, dozens of shoppers with phones out recording, and a store manager who clearly regretted his decisions. Judge Carter, I apologize on behalf of the Detroit Police Department. This should not have happened. Carter's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades on the bench. Lieutenant Harris, an apology is appreciated but insufficient. I was racially profiled, unlawfully detained, searched without probable cause, and arrested without investigation. In front of my neighbors, in the store where I've shopped for nearly 2 decades. I will be filing a formal complaint. I will be pursuing legal action. And I will be making sure this is addressed at the highest levels of your department. Harris turned to Walsh and Miller with barely contained anger. Both of you return to the precinct immediately. You're suspended pending investigation. I'll be filing a report tonight. Why do some police officers immediately assume black shoppers are criminals when white shoppers face no such suspicion? Comment your thoughts. Judge Carter left the grocery store without his groceries, his evening plans destroyed, his dignity assaulted, his faith in his community shaken. Drove home and spent the evening documenting every detail of the arrest, writing a formal complaint to the Detroit police chief, and contacting colleagues in the legal community who'd be outraged by what had occurred. Within 24 hours, news of the arrest had spread throughout Detroit's legal community and beyond. Judges expressed solidarity. The Michigan Judicial Association issued a statement condemning the arrest. The NAACP demanded accountability. Local news outlets covered the story. National legal publications picked it up as an example of how pervasive racial profiling remained. Detroit judge arrested at grocery store, 22-year veteran of bench handcuffed based on false shoplifting report. Judge Harold Carter detained while shopping. Officers ignore witnesses who identify prominent jurist. Racial profiling at Eastwood Market. Sitting judge arrested after white shopper reports suspicious, black man buying vegetables. The response was immediate and intense. The Detroit police chief personally called Judge Carter to apologize. The mayor issued a statement promising investigation. The store chain that owned Eastwood Market announced policy changes. But the damage was done, and the evidence was overwhelming. Officers Walsh and Miller were placed on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation. Internal Affairs reviewed the security footage from the store, which showed Judge Carter's completely normal shopping behavior and the officer's unjustified arrest. Witness statements from store employees and shoppers confirmed no theft occurred. The officer's own body camera footage showed them making assumptions without investigation. Judge Carter decided to pursue civil litigation rather than accept any settlement offer from the city. He wanted a jury of his peers to hear what had happened and to render a verdict that would send a message about accountability. His attorneys filed the lawsuit 11 months after the arrest. The complaint named officers Kevin Walsh and Brandon Miller, Lieutenant Monica Harris for supervisory failure, the Detroit Police Department, the City of Detroit, Eastwood Market, and Patricia Hoffman, the white woman who'd made the false complaint. The claims were comprehensive. Unlawful arrest and false imprisonment without probable cause, unlawful search in violation of the Fourth Amendment, violation of civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault and battery through application of handcuffs without legal justification, defamation through false accusations of shoplifting, negligent hiring and supervision given the officers' documented complaint histories, and corporate negligence by the grocery store for calling police without verifying the complaint. The complaint included complete disciplinary records. Walsh, 9 complaints in 6 years, 7 involving unlawful detention or racial profiling, 2 sustained. Miller, 7 complaints in 4 years, 6 involving racial bias or improper searches, 1 sustained. Documentation proving Detroit police knew both officers demonstrated patterns of discriminatory conduct. The evidence was incontrovertible. Security footage showing Judge Carter's normal shopping behavior and the unjustified arrest. Body camera footage from both officers showing they made no investigation before detaining him. Testimony from store employees, shoppers, and Professor Silverman. Expert testimony about proper police procedures for shoplifting investigations. The officers' own admission that they found no stolen merchandise. The city's attorneys advised settling, warning that a jury would be outraged by the arrest of a respected judge. But Judge Carter insisted on trial. He wanted a public accounting of what had occurred. The case went to trial 17 months after the arrest. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury heard testimony from Judge Carter describing the humiliation and trauma of being handcuffed in his neighborhood store. They watched security footage showing his calm, normal shopping behavior. They heard from witnesses who tried to tell the officers they were making a mistake. They listened to experts explain that no reasonable officer would make an arrest under these circumstances without investigation. The defense attempted to argue that the officers were simply responding to a call and had qualified immunity. But the evidence of their failure to investigate, their refusal to listen to witnesses, and their patterns of prior complaints undermined any claim of reasonableness. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned a unanimous verdict in favor of Judge Carter, $2.2 million in damages. The breakdown was $800,000 in compensatory damages for emotional distress, humiliation, and violation of civil rights, $1.4 million in punitive damages against the officers and the city, designed to punish the conduct and deter future violations. Should juries be allowed to award punitive damages against individual officers who racially profile citizens? Drop your answer. Officers Kevin Walsh and Brandon Miller were terminated 2 weeks after the verdict. Their termination letters were nearly identical. Officer name: conducted an unlawful arrest without probable cause, failed to investigate a shoplifting complaint before detaining a citizen, conducted an unlawful search, and ignored multiple witnesses who identified the detainee as a prominent judge. Despite prior complaints documenting patterns of discriminatory conduct, officer name: demonstrated no improvement in judgment or adherence to constitutional standards. Employment is terminated immediately with no eligibility for rehire. Both officers' names were entered into the National Decertification Index. Their law enforcement careers ended at ages 31 and 28. Neither issued public statements. Both faced potential federal civil rights charges that were declined by federal prosecutors. Eastwood Market settled separately with Judge Carter for an undisclosed amount and implemented comprehensive training for all employees on handling shoplifting complaints and avoiding racial profiling. Patricia Hoffman, the woman who made the false complaint, faced no criminal charges but was banned from Eastwood Market properties and became a subject of public scorn when her identity became known during trial. Judge Carter used a portion of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund for Detroit residents who couldn't afford attorneys when facing false accusations or police misconduct. He returned to the bench, continuing to serve with distinction while also speaking publicly about his experience. He testified at Michigan legislative hearings on police accountability. His testimony carried the weight of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms and understood both law enforcement and civil rights. I've been a judge for 22 years. I've presided over thousands of cases. I've sent people to jail and I've released people who were wrongly accused. I understand law enforcement. I respect the difficulty of police work. I've defended good officers who made reasonable decisions under pressure. He paused, his voice carrying emotion. But what happened to me at Eastwood Market was not reasonable police work. It was racial profiling, pure and simple. Officers Walsh and Miller received a complaint about a black man shopping and immediately assumed I was a criminal. They didn't investigate. They didn't observe my behavior. They didn't check with store management. They just handcuffed me and searched me based on the color of my skin. Another pause. I'm a sitting judge. I have judicial identification. I'm known in my community. I shop at that store every week. None of that protected me from being treated as a criminal because someone decided a black man buying vegetables looked suspicious. His voice strengthened with conviction. $2.2 million is accountability. The jury spoke clearly. They said this conduct was so egregious, so unjustified, that punitive damages were necessary to send a message. But money doesn't undo humiliation. It doesn't erase the memory of being handcuffed in front of my neighbors. It doesn't restore the sense of safety that comes from believing you can shop for groceries without being criminalized. He looked directly at the legislators. If this can happen to a judge with 22 years on the bench, imagine what happens to ordinary citizens who don't have judicial credentials or legal knowledge. Imagine what happens to young black men who are stopped, searched, and arrested based on complaints police never investigate. The answer is documented in thousands of cases where no jury ever hears the evidence because the victims can't afford attorneys or don't believe the system will deliver justice. The hearing room was completely silent. This wasn't about two officers making a mistake. This was about the Detroit Police Department allowing Walsh and Miller to accumulate 16 complaints between them without meaningful intervention. This was about a grocery store that called police on a black customer without verifying that any crime had occurred. This was about a society that continues to treat black people as presumptively criminal. Officers Walsh and Miller saw me selecting vegetables and their minds constructed a narrative. Black man must be shoplifting. Complaint confirms bias. Make the arrest. When presented with witnesses who identified me, with the absence of any stolen merchandise, with my own identification as a judge, they couldn't process the information because their racial assumptions were too strong. This is how racial profiling operates. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's officers responding to a complaint about a black man in the produce section and deciding that complaint must be true because it aligns with their prejudices. It's a store manager calling police without investigating. It's a white shopper seeing a black person and perceiving criminality. Walsh and Miller's careers are over. That's consequence. The city paid $2.2 million. That's accountability. Policies changed. That's progress. But I still can't shop for groceries without wondering if someone will call the police on me. Money doesn't restore that sense of belonging in your own community. The real question is what changes now. Do police departments finally terminate officers after the first sustained racial profiling complaint instead of waiting for them to arrest a judge? Do stores finally investigate before calling armed officers? Do we finally acknowledge that black people deserve to shop, to exist, to live without being presumed criminal? Because if we don't fix the systems that protected Walsh and Miller despite 16 documented complaints, if we don't address the culture that teaches white people to see black shoppers as suspicious, then we're just waiting for the next arrest, the next humiliation, the next jury verdict. Comment if you believe this should be law. Police officers who make arrests based on unverified complaints without investigation face automatic termination, and businesses that call police on customers without evidence of actual crimes face civil liability for resulting damages. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability requires exposing how racism operates even against the most accomplished citizens, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep documenting these patterns. We're going to keep demanding that juries hold officers accountable. We're going to keep fighting for everyone who's been stopped, searched, or arrested for the crime of existing while black. This isn't about one judge or two officers or one grocery store. This is about all of us and the society we choose to accept.